Hello, everyone, and welcome. Welcome to Creators Mastermind Haven. Today, we're talking with Beth Herndobler, and I don't even know if I said your name last name right, but I think I gave it a good try. With that being said, we're going to talk about. I want to talk with her about sacred geometry. I want to talk to her about embodying like your vision, and we really want to talk to her also about activating your inner superpowers. So it's going to be a fun-filled conversation. You are going to love Beth. She's a trial attorney turned intuitive. And she has a really cool story. That's like a nugget of your story, Beth, because I feel like they would align with it, because you like really was like deep into being a lawyer. And then you had this like light come through you that really like sparked and woke up all your angels and everything. Can you just give us a nugget of that? And then we'll go ahead and play.
It wasn't a light and a spark in the way that people would think of that. Like, it wasn't like, oh, it was like, you are going to die if you keep living like this. The exact words were, you will not survive if you continue to live like this. So it was more like a slap in the head, but that's because I wasn't listening. I've always been connected with the angelic realm. I never questioned it. It was never something that I was told was inappropriate. I never discussed it. When I was young, I was a devoted Catholic until about 7th grade. And I even wanted to be a nun. I was always in connection with the divine, but I didn't have a framework for it. And I didn't have an understanding of moving between realms. I didn't even know that I was doing that. So after a weekday going to happy hour, lawyers, well, depends on your field. Trial lawyers drink a lot. After happy hour,
you have to.
I came home and made a picture of Cosmos for myself and passed out in my work clothes on the couch with the TV on, looking at pictures that were on my coffee table of my then barely 3-year-old twin grandsons, who I was told probably 10 years, so 25 years ago, a neighbor who was psychic and read palms while we were getting drunk, read my palm and said, there are 2 more beings coming through you. And I'm, this oven is closed. There's nothing more. Yeah, no. And I gave examples. I have a godson, I have a God. Nope. There are 2 beings who are not here on earth, who are coming through for you, to be with you. And then she threw my hand down and said, pass me the shaker. She was done. And it turns out to have been my grandsons. So I didn't quite link it up yet until I came out here, but every night I kissed their pictures and was sad because I wasn't out here in California. I was in Chicago. And when I woke up that Thursday morning, all fuzzy and what happened, and the TV is still on, and now I got to go to work. And that's when I heard the voice, you will not survive if you continue to live like this. And from that moment forward, I began working on getting out here, because I had told their mother, my daughter, who had already been living out here for about 10 years. I told her when she was 3 is a very important number, sacred geometry and all the way around, that we would live in California. And by the time this happened, when I had that experience, both my adult daughters lived here and I was still in Chicago. And I'm like, I got to change this. So that's a bit of how I moved. It was not easy. It was not graceful. It was painful. It was scary. I had to be pushed out of my office at work by my friend to go give my notice to the boss, because she kept saying, you are leaving, right? And I said, yeah, I am. Well, then what are you afraid of? What do you think he's going to do? Fire you? You're going to quit. I mean, I was that terrified. So that's why when I say it wasn't exactly like the light came through me, it was this whole other experience. I don't want folks to have any kind of preconceived notion about what it looks like. It may look like something completely different than what I'm describing, or what happened to you, Jenneth. That's the key to opening into what you're here to do, and to receiving your intuitive gifts, is trusting. As beautiful visionary transformational coach, Lisa Nichols, says, with knees knocking. If your knees are not knocking, your dream's not big enough. My knees were not even under my body. They were shaking so hard, but I still kept going because I heard the voice. I knew it was true. If I did not change what I was doing, I wouldn't survive. And here I am. 13 years.
Right.
Beyond
It's funny because my origin story that stepped me into this said I was in a dead-end corporate job, and I went at lunchtime into my hot car. We're in Texas, and I laid my head on the steering wheel, and I heard this voice, "Walk away." And didn't know what it really meant at the time. And I tried to go back the next day, and I was hit by a computer crash. Now, I was working at a company where they could have totally fixed it too. Took them a week and a half to get that computer back to me. And by then I was like, I'm out. but you know, I had trapped.
Out there.
It's like, you know, but in this real reality, you've got to look at, well, you know, you entrap yourself, like as an attorney, especially because you've got like all this money coming in, and you've got these mortgage, these cars, all these things. So that's not the easiest thing, like walk away, except yours was basically like, do it or die.
It absolutely was. And
so how was that? Were you ready to leave?
Golly. No, I mean, on top of everything, there's the programming, because in law school, they actually, the first year, more than one teacher said some version of the law is a jealous mistress. And I went to night school because I had a kid when I was 18. So in order to be able to work and deal with school and everything, I went to night school. And most of those people already had a career, a lot of corporate people, bankers, teachers, what have you, social workers. And he was saying, if you have a family and a job already, that's it. You have to be willing to give up everything else because the law is a jealous mistress. And that is like, beat into you. So when I said I was leaving, several people asked me if I was dying. You know, do you have cancer? Why are you quitting? I mean, it's just not in the fabric of the whole profession to walk away. And when I did, it was right. I moved in 2011. I began the process end of 2008 when the real estate market crashed, and I didn't have anything because all kinds of things just sort of disappeared. So the good thing was like, well, I can stay here and just keep paying this mortgage and keep being miserable, but I'm not going to have anything anyway. I might as well go ahead on and go. And so I came to California literally with nothing because I lost all the stuff that I had in that crash, sort of like your computer crash. Yeah. If you think staying here is the answer, let me show you it's not. So it was a real rough journey, but the divine rises up to meet you if you're ready. And I was ready. I was ready to see things differently and do things differently. I had planned to come out here and be a high-end personal assistant because in addition to being a lawyer, I had a bunch of side hustles over the years. I had been an event planner, a caterer, and I had also had an independent record label with some friends of mine. And I went to a high-end headhunter that Rosie O'Donnell's personal assistant turned me on to. Oh. Turns out he was only talking to me because he wanted to get to her and had lost contact with her. But he said, you know, with the way things have gone, I can't place you. No one's going to pay $25,000. Well, my jaw dropped. I'm like, personal assistants are, you know, the person who's looking for one. But I mean, if you're talking about celebrities and really rich people, they want people vetted. So, okay, no one's going to pay $25,000 for a career transplant. You better just come out here and hit the ground running with Craigslist. And I was like, I am 53 years old, Craigslist? But I said, okay, if that's what it has to be. And every time an obstacle came, I stayed firm to the commitment, to the voice that said, you got to change. And right about then, my daughter got a new job and the nanny they had wasn't working out. She was going to have more intense hours. And she said, what would you think about taking care of the twins? And I said, I love it. well, another challenge because 4-year-old boys, I was never a stay-at-home mom. I always worked. I had 2 girls, 13 years apart. It was like herding cats every day. And then the turning point was when I was trying to run our days like a law practice. We got to go. This is what we're doing. Mm-hmm. And this particular day, they were in my little house naked, throwing their clothes at each other, running around. I couldn't, I'd get some sock on and then the other one's off. And I was getting very frustrated. And I do not believe in corporal punishment, but I want to smack their heads together. And it is 7:15 in the morning. And I'm going to have them till like 7:30 at night. And so I said, if we don't get going, we're not going to make it. And this is to meet the neighbor to go to the park with her and her kids. We're not going to make it.
Right? They're like, oh no, we're not going to go to the park now.
And Quincy, who is known as the Buddha boy, was standing on the back of that couch right there, naked. He looks at me like this. While we get going, can we look in the dirt? And my head just started buzzing, but it also was like explode. And that probably is the shot of light that you're talking about. But again, it's not white light. It was a lot of action. His brother yells, I said, why? Why do you want to look in the dirt? And his brother yells from the chair, he's a dirty boy. He's always dirty. And he still is. He's very tactile. I mean, he's 15 and a half. You put him outside for a half an hour, he's coming back with dirt on him somewhere. It's just the way he is. He leans forward and says, there's treasure in the dirt. I'll show you. And my whole body vibrated and chills everywhere. And I said, if you can get ready in 2 minutes, we can do that. They were ready in 30 seconds. We were outside by the driveway, totally forgot about the neighbors. They found us. We spent an hour plus with him showing me the treasure in the dirt. Seeds, nuts, rocks, a bead, a little shiny piece of paper. What he was showing me was to be present. And he was also creating the opening for me to have a relationship, a conscious relationship with Mother Earth. I had always been a big tree person and laying on the ground. And I grew up a block and a half from the Lake Michigan in Chicago. I mean, I was always there, but again, it wasn't conscious. It's the same thing as with my connection to the angelic realm. It was always happening, but I wasn't conscious of it. So he, at 3 years old, and now he says, because I happened to be with them this morning, and he said, are you going to tell that treasure in the dirt story? I said, probably. That's the moment. That's the moment. He shakes his head and it's like, you could tell a better one. I'm like, there is no better one.
It was funny. I was just on an interview and she was saying how she read a NASA story on how children, like before the age of 3 or 4, they are like considered genius. And then when you go from like the 5 to 7 arena, then they're like a little less genius. And then as you keep going up, then it's less and less. And then it was like, and the study didn't even really talk about adults because they just kept thinking that they're less and less and less. I know, right? Her thought is, I think there's a lot of thoughts, right? We're born and our brains are in these like alpha states, and lower. And so we like just receive, and everything's imagination, and we play in that realm, and as a hypnotist myself, I'm like, yes, let's play in the realm of imagination and create our internal landscape so we can, boom,
That's perfect. I love that.
Right?
Yeah.
And so he was just playing with as being that imagination treasure. And I just, that's such an adorable story. And I think that that's just a beautiful bridge into this play with our guides because a lot of that could seem like our imagination, except, I think that when we've had awareness and then we have proof on the outside, then we have more agreement. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
I think the most important thing is don't let go of your imagination. Become aware of it. Because when I'm guiding people in an activation, I will say, see, sense, feel, know, or just imagine whatever it is that I'm seeing and guiding them through. Too often as adults, we let the ego, the left brain mental mind, override that imagination sense, that connected to the all that is, because it isn't something that's intellectual. It's received differently by everyone. I mean, some people really do hear. I hear in a lot of different ways. I get messages in songs. I get pitches in my ears. Sometimes I hear actual words. That's not the only way I receive. But all that was happening for a long time before I realized that that's what was going on. So some people block it completely and just shut it down and don't let whatever that otherness is, that is the truth of them, that other outwardly stuff. And other people, I mean, and there's wide ranges, right? Because a lot of people, when they express it as kids, their parents are like, stop talking about that. People are going to think you're crazy. Lorna Byrne, if you've ever heard of her, Angels in My Hair, she's an Irish woman who sees angels like in the room. I don't see them. I see them in here. I don't see them out there. And she was said in her village to be retarded because she would run out into the woods and be running around playing and laughing and talking. And they thought she was crazy, but she was talking to angels. And then as she got older, they're all lining up at her door for help. But her childhood was very challenging because no one ever told her stop doing that. They just said that's how she is. So somewhere in there is where we all are, all the way to the end of me, where I had all these experiences and never questioned them. I received them and allowed them, but I never brought them up here. I just accepted it, and that was okay. It just meant I wasn't really harnessing it or using it or even connecting with it. I was really just a receptacle because I talked to God and to the angels all the time. I still love going into a beautiful church because there's so much sacred power in there. I don't necessarily want to be there for any kind of service, but I'm a recovering Catholic, so forget about that. Although I will say this, when 9/11 happened, the first thing I did was go to the Catholic Church and pray. So that can be a good thing or not. And I'm not talking about religion. I'm saying what's embedded, the core, the idea. So if you have an idea in your head that you're not this or that, or you can't, or it's bad, you need to work on that, because trust is the key to opening to what you're here to do and what you're here to offer and support. If you didn't trust that you could use hypnosis for people's betterment, it wouldn't work because you wouldn't believe it. You wouldn't do it. Your vibration would be out of sync with the work. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what
No, it's perfect. I guess, it's sort of, I used to have this dial in my very first book. Well, it's still there in my very first book. And it goes from and I used to use this analogy, do you believe you can swim a lap in the pool, or do you know you can? And I started to play with this word knower. And it's like, what is it that you really know here? And I know that I can take people, and as you know, that you can be the soul whisperer.
That's right.
Right. I think that, you just know that, when you've tapped into it. I mean, was there a time as an attorney where you just knew you were going to win a case? I mean, I think it might have been justified on facts and things like that, right?
I'll tell you, here's how it worked. And this was my intuitive side dovetailing with the masculine strength that I run. And I'm talking about divine masculine.
Sure.
I'm much more, when I first started training, I was assessed, I was 80% masculine. And ideally you want to be 50-50. I worked really hard and shifted and got it down to 65. And the healer teacher said, you need to leave it. I was like, I've been working so hard. And she said, no, for you, that's where you need to stay. And so that was always happening while I was a lawyer. And the way more than I knew I was going to win or this was going to happen, the way my intuitive divine self expressed was for this, as an example, when I was doing a products liability case. You have to have experts to say something was wrong with the product. And my client was a Vietnam vet with this horrible, horrible story. Just suffice it to say, he was 4 and his younger brother was 2, and the parents moved out and left them in the apartment. That's how his life started. And then we're not here for this, but I am more for a Department of Peace than a Department of War. But I also feel like if someone does go to war for this country, then we ought to stand by them. And they didn't. And he started breaking down and having all these problems. And then he got it together and got this job and ended up getting a catastrophic injury that ripped all the skin off his leg, the inside of his leg, in the dirt. So it went all the way up from his foot to his leg. There was no way I was not going to get some money for this man, even though the company he worked for, it was a machine that, like a lawnmower where you have to hold the power bar on. And because that was so hard to do, they tied it off, which meant that you can't let go and the machine stops and he's down in a hole and no one can hear. So there was a very strong argument that he was so contributorily negligent that there was no liability by this rich company. So I go out to the middle of nowhere outside of Chicago to this Quonset hut where this engineer is. And he's like, this machine is actually state of the art. And there's, we had a long conversation, but the upshot of it was he said, there's nothing wrong with this machine. And I exploded. And I slammed my fist on the table and I told him an impassioned version of what I just shared with you about this man's life. And I said, you're going to find something, with a lot more colorful language. You're going to find something wrong with this machine, because there is something wrong with it. There's always something wrong. And I am not leaving until you do. And he's like, we're arguing back and forth. And I pushed myself off his desk. The chair went back and I sat like this. And he's like, what's that supposed to mean? I said, I'm getting comfortable. I'm not leaving. I'm leaving here in an hour. I said, bye. I'll be here tomorrow. What are you talking about? Are you crazy? I said, I am crazy. I'm telling you, you're going to find something that's wrong with this machine. And he looked at me and assessed that I was serious. That's the moment I said, I am going to win. Now, that's a different process than what you're talking about.
Well, except there has to be something inside of you.
That's right.
That made you know that you knew. Right. I mean, and so
5 minutes, he had an answer in 5 minutes. He said, the muffler's not good enough. If the muffler was better, they'd have heard him screaming. It only took him 5 minutes. It was there.
Yeah.
And I knew it. Again,
you knew. I know.
It's not.
Yeah.
Well, so I think that now, but I didn't before.
This is such a. I love this so much because it's such a good conversation. Where people are like, well, I go out and visit my angels and I go into bliss and blah 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 blah. But here's a situation where, you just knew, and you were going to win the case too. And it's like, okay, so that information, where did that come from? It came from frequency in general, I think, right?
Yes.
Yeah. That intuitive frequency. That's awesome. And which, everybody has this. I think that just more people have honed it and kind of transverse it. And so I was looking at your site and really wanted to talk to you about sacred geometry. So I'm going to transition over there for a second here. One of the things that, this isn't necessarily sacred geometry, but one of the things I've been noticing comes up is numbers. I'll see 111, 333, 444, those repetitive numbers all the time. Even bills sometimes will come in and have that. And I think, well, I'm just aligned, because I know that when I feel more aligned, I see it more. But I don't know enough about that, nor sacred geometry. So I wanted to kind of dive in and talk to you a little bit about how sacred geometry, how can it help us, and how can we like create our lives in a better way because of it?
So I don't know a lot about it. That's the first thing, get rid of it. You, me, everybody can know anything and everything they want to know about sacred geometry. And I submit, and I'm sure other people might disagree, but doesn't matter. Seeing those repetitive numbers is sacred geometry. It is the use of the material, mathematical, scientific combinations of things to create an energetic frequency that is sacred, that is reaching out to you, you to it, and combining with it. So, for example, the Fibonacci spiral, when I first started connecting, I've always been connected to geometry. I was not good at math in high school and college. I only took what I had to take in college, but you have to take math every year until then. But I loved geometry. And I had I had no idea why. I had no knowledge in high school that there was this thing called sacred geometry. I didn't know anything about it. And then I kept seeing these spirals. I don't remember when this was, maybe about 8 or 9, 10 years ago after I moved out here. And I instantly knew that was a Fibonacci spiral. And I had no idea how I knew. I really didn't know. So I started researching it and then started looking for examples of it in nature and seeing where it was and understanding what it meant. And that was the first experience I had of being conscious of my own connection to sacred geometry and how powerful it is in my life. I mean, if you come around my house, 80% of everything that's arranged is in a pattern of 3. And that's not on purpose. It's just the Trinity, the triangle. That's, even going back to my Catholic roots, Father, Son, Holy Ghost, it's always been there. It's just, was I allowing it? So when you say, oh, I don't know that much about it, stop saying that. Because that, in fact, this is random, but it really struck me. I was listening to some high hertz frequency music on YouTube while I was setting up for this interview. And there was a fellow who commented that I'm actually going to go back if I can find it and reach out to him, because it was working with Wayne Dyer's I Am Wishes Fulfilled meditation that he did with James Twyman. And this comment was, I am a janitor and I am going to go to college and I am going to become a teacher. And I'm like, right there, stop. Cut out, I am a janitor. Now, there's nothing wrong with being a janitor, but why are you putting that frequency? You already are. You're saying you want to be something else. You can't hold that space that you are and put that out into the universe. That's putting you into this little tiny Fibonacci spiral that's already, you're in it. So what are you going to do? You're going to maybe be the head janitor. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. My father they called him a sanitary engineer at the end of his career. He was worked in the steel mills. And when the mills all closed, I mean, he was a manager. He did end up being a janitor. And why? Because the first thing he said to me when he got that job, which was a job he had to fight for to get, he was in his mid to late 50s. And we were in a recession. It was really rough. He fought hard for that job. And then he said, janitors are drunks and alcoholics who sit in the basement and they're the lowest of the low. I said, well, that is not true. And apparently that's why you got the job, to figure that out. So that's what is happening on all levels, and how sacred geometry can influence that is that if you're aware of its power, and you even just, go on Pinterest and put in sacred geometry, and you'll get all kind of charts of symbols. Look at them and see which one. Right now, just thinking of it, I was looking at one yesterday, trying to interpret a water like this. I had a whole bunch. Can you see that? Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. So I had one that I didn't keep the paper that said what it was. I didn't know what it was. So I'm looking it up. And as I'm looking at this chart of like symbols and sacred geometry, some of them really make my head buzz, and others are just like, oh, that's nice. That's where you should start. And I don't, let me say that again, I don't like using that word. That's where anyone who wants to connect deeper with the power, the energetic power of sacred geometry, start there, look at symbols and see what resonates with you. And then work with that. Look it up on Google. What does it mean? What does it open? And then work with that energy to open it. So when you see 1111, 333, 444, 555, look it up. They're going to be, let's say, the 100 different definitions of what it means. You look at the one that resonates, then that's the message for you. And that's true whether we're talking about a simple square. I mean, I build abundance containers for people. Mine is a box. It's just a 3D box. That's it. That's sacred. It's geometric, and it's absolutely massive in the power that it has. Now, the true test of my connection came when I was at assisting Kenji Kumara at a retreat, the last retreat right before the pandemic in Asheville. And all this symbols started coming through while I was sitting there. And I started frantically writing and drawing and And at the end of that session, this woman came over to me and said, "Can I see your notes? Because I didn't really get all the things he was saying." And I said, "Well, no, that's not what," and she pressed me. Just, we don't need to go through the details. It went on for a while. It was very weird. And it was like, she felt like I had something she didn't get. And I said, what I was writing has nothing to do with this. I will show it to you, but it has nothing to do with what he was saying. It was something that was coming through me. And she looked at the symbols and was like, "What does that mean?" I said, "I don't know." "Well, why are you writing it? Why are you trying to hide it from me?" I said, "I'm not trying to hide it from you. You wanted my notes from what he was saying. I don't have that." And those drawings that I did, there were 6 of them. Maybe a year and a half later, I got the information, put this into a masterclass, and it's called Mastering Energetic Alchemy. Maybe it needs a new title too, through sacred geometry, because all these symbols were downloaded to me. And then over time, as I would gaze at them, more information would come through about what they can be used for and how they function. So I can feel people saying, "Well, I don't have that gift." Well, how do you know? I didn't have that gift until I let it come through, and here's somebody watching me thinking I'm doing what everyone else is doing, taking notes. But in that moment, I was allowing the space that was being held in the retreat center to open me to receive what the divine had for me, which is, you need to work with sacred geometry. And through that training, divine training, I became a master sacred geometrist. And as with everything, Jenneth, it's so much of it about trust.
Yeah, I guess that it always becomes the truth. It's sort of like, if it's true for you, then you'll know it because it's light. It feels like light.
That's right.
One of the things that I have is circles, which might be a spiral. Like, as you were talking about, I was like, maybe this is the Fibonacci spiral. I kind of wanted to step back a minute, because you were saying that when people were saying "I am" statements, how are you kind of connecting that with the spiral? I was a little bit confused on that.
I am that I am is said to be the name that God, Source, gave to Moses through the burning bush in the Bible, when he said, "How shall I call you? I am that I am." And that has the power, the infinitely expanding power of the Fibonacci spiral. So when you use an intention statement, a mantra, and you put "I am," as it can just be "I am." Right. Or "I am that I am." I often do the full thing. You're invoking that exponentially expansive power of the Fibonacci spiral, because you are affirming your connection to Source, to all.
Oh my God, I get it.
Hey! So that's why I'm saying, if you're a janitor and you don't want to be a janitor, and your intention statement, it starts with "I am a janitor," like, dude, all that other stuff that you're putting there behind is not getting the attention, that, because right there, your first part of your sentence, you're plugging into an infinitely expansive experience as a janitor. And
yeah,
that's not the same as going to college and being a teacher. Just take that off and start
so
with,
yeah,
I am going to college, and I am a teacher. The other thing with the expansion and with the sacred geometry, and especially with the Fibonacci, is affirm it as if it is already happening. And for years.
Yes. Well, yeah, I mean, that is kind of, with suggestion in hypnosis, you do that. It's
Yes,
it's
you
mostly,
understand.
yeah, it's like you are a money magnet, right? You are the authority. You are the leader of whatever they want to be the leader of, right? It's sort of like, okay. And then they go, I am it, and they embrace it, right? So that activates the Fibonacci spiral, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Oh, I love that. Oh, that's really exciting. So, with a few speakers, I've done like like a Metatron meditation. Are you into that as well? How does that?
Metatron specifically.
Yeah.
He is not someone that I connect with on the regular, certainly not as much as Archangel Michael. And it just, for the very first time, kind of hit me. Well, of course, like think of the story I told when I was a lawyer. I'm not leaving here until you find some wrong. That's the energy of Michael with the sword, with the protector, the whole of that. Metatron is more what I've become. He was not someone that was prominent in my journey, and every now and again I will connect with him, and especially in an activation, he'll come in to support, but he is not I'm gonna have to inquire into this because I've never thought about this. He is not someone.
He's like, isn't he the like leader of the sacred geometry? I thought was what.
Yes, he is. But again, it sounds perfect. Thank you for saying that and asking the question, because I don't have to be with him,
right,
in order to be what I am.
Well, it's in the field, so
that's right.
Yeah. So I think
exactly.
Love it.
And so why and how? That's another thing too. Is how we receive, who connects with us, who speaks to us, who shows up for us. I've had so many people. Oh, I wish I felt things like you get chills, your head tingles. You have your version of that. So the reason I'm saying this is when you said that, there was the ego started acting up and was like, you don't connect with Metatron. Maybe you're not really a sacred geometrist.
That's funny.
It happened.
Everything that is would you destroy and create.
I mean, literally, Jenneth, that just happened. When you said that, I was like, oh, except I didn't. I have a better exterior.
Yeah.
I didn't show you that, but that was what I felt. And I'm like, get out of here.
Yeah. Well, because that's not true. I mean, I think that the bugs of doubt, right? Exactly. I do this. I have this course called Clearing the Noise. And I feel like, there's these little bugs that, are, it's almost like, so this is an interesting conversation. We can go there if you want, but I have this sense that we're being controlled, right? That there is techies, I'd like to call them techies, that are kind of controlling this earth world.
Okay.
And this is kind of out there, so we don't have to go there if you don't want to.
Oh, you go ahead. You brought it up. It must need to be out there.
I mean, it's sort of, why do we only live to like 80 to 100, right? Like, why is the lifespan on this planet so short? It seems that there's a possibility beyond our current lifespan. It's almost like we are being controlled so that we don't get enough wisdom or information. That's just one level of it. But we're also being controlled with these like entities or inklings that are little bugs, like bugs of doubt, where if we really tap into it, is this true or not? We know it's not true, but since it's in our head, we think that it's ours. So those are kind of two situations where it's very like buggy, for the lack of a better word, in our earth world. So what are your thoughts on, are we being controlled by the dark side of the moon or techies or something like that? Like, have you gotten indications with that kind of information?
No.
Okay.
And it's not, okay, let me see I do not, this is hard to express in words. I don't deal with dark energy. That doesn't mean I work with it and I help people clear it, but I am not engaging with it. It is not allowed in my realm, in my frequency. I work to protect my field and to make sure that only that which is favorable to supporting me to the fulfillment of all of the divine missions I came here to fulfill, only that which is the truth and light of me at the center of me is what I am connecting with. Is dark energy out there? Absolutely. Is it trying to do this, that, or the other? Absolutely. Are you letting it do that? Do you open the door to everyone who knocks at your house and let them in without saying, who are you? I mean, so when you say controlling, it can only control you if you let it.
Well, that's what I was saying, right? If something's coming in your head going, no, you're not, you can't, you're awful, you're wrong, you're bad, you're, no good, right? If you've got little noise like that in your head,
then
then
you have to determine where's it coming from,
okay.
right? Because the ego is your own dark energy.
Right.
And
right.
I didn't even understand. I always thought ego was like somebody who thought, until I got into doing this work, my understanding of the ego was somebody who thought they were like better than they are. They have a really big ego. That's the tiniest part of how the ego functions. The ego is based on fear, and it's trying to keep you small and stuck because it thinks that's how you're safe. It's trying to help you. Now, all the dark stuff that's out there that's not in your being,
but you're personally evolved. I think you know the difference. The question really came from the collective, right? That I sense, I'm aware that that the collective, like this noise in the ticker of our head, that are lies, that I feel like there's this bigger control system, and it's even bigger than just us embodying and in training to our parents and stuff like that. But those are just my thoughts. So sometimes I like to ask it when it comes up.
Don't say that. Those are just my thoughts. No, I have the experience.
It's an awareness. It came through my mouth.
I mean, but when you say just, it's like limiting what you said. They're just my thoughts. No, this is the truth as you experience it in the world. And whether I'm experiencing that because of how I hold myself. I mean, are you going to walk into a Quonset hut and tell an engineer, I'm not leaving until you tell me something? That's not you. That's not your life.
Well, I am stubborn like that.
And if you were a lawyer doing what I did, you probably would do that, but that's not your path. Right. So I think the thing about dark energy, especially in these times where it's the violence and chaos and hate and othering and separation, the way that I look at it is that's the foundation of the 3D earthly realm. Opposition, duality, limiting thinking, us versus them. The whole point of the earth is to see if we can come out of that into the oneness of all that is with Mother, Father, God, source of all, the light. If we can allow ourselves to be the light, to be the love, and to know that the fear is the lie. And just using, as they do in the Course in Miracles, fear and love as the two ultimate opposite emotions, right? There's lots of gradations in between, but ultimately we're talking, are you in love or are you in fear? If you're in fear, you're opening the door to connecting with all that dark energy and entities and everything else that's out there. Now, for example, an entity might be a disembodied spirit who doesn't realize that it is dead. At that retreat that I mentioned earlier, where it's so interesting how things come up the field, where I received all this unique to me, new sacred geometry. The first day I got there, I came with a friend who I trained with in the Academy for the Intuitive Arts, and we were sitting on rocking chairs on the front porch of the retreat center, and it was dusk and was just so beautiful and peaceful, and we don't live in the same state, so we hadn't seen each other in a long time, and all of a sudden she goes, "Did you see that?" And I said, "What?" "That guy." I said, "What guy?" "He came out of the bushes and he walked over there." And I said, what did he look like? He had a blanket around him and blah, blah, blah. And she described, I said, did he look like a Civil War soldier? Because that's what she was describing. And she was like, "Yeah." I said, "Okay. Well, I didn't see him, but I believe you did." She's like, "You don't think I'm going crazy?" No. So that prompted me to go on a study and to talk to friends and colleagues that are more uniquely focused. I am a medium, but it's not the focal point of my work. And for these other people, it is. And then I started reading and doing a lot of research. And it turns out that a lot of entities are simply spirits that don't know they've died.
Yeah.
And if you invite them, like if she was in a place to have a conversation with that spirit that she saw, she could say, "Where do you think you are?" And the person is still living out the war. And if you can get them to turn around and see the light where all their ancestors and divine beings are waiting to receive them, because transitioning is leaving your body, crossing over is the second step. In that gap is where we get a lot of entities. Then the ego starts telling us they're programming, they're doing this, they're doing that, when in reality, they're just lost. Now, there's a difference between that kind of entity and an entity that is actively malevolent and trying to harm. That's the part where I can't and won't and don't
really go
there because it does not serve me in my field to go down that rabbit hole. And I encourage anyone who does to be very conscious and discerning. Is it serving you? To know this, to have that connection, to focus on that, because what you put your attention on, we know this, spiritual physics, you get more of that. I don't care if there are dark energies out there that are programming us. If I'm focusing on that, then I'm opening my field to a connection with that dark energy. Am I suggesting we look away and it's not happening? Absolutely not. I shield and ground to protect myself several times a day if things are rough. I do my house. I set pillars of light. I'm always protecting myself. If there was nothing out there in the collective that was negative, if there was no negative, I wouldn't need to protect myself.
See, and I don't feel like I need to protect myself. I'm like, I am, and I know what I am. So I kind of am like, okay, well, that's interesting information. Thank you very much.
And the reason for the protection is because the frequency of the collective is very strong. Yeah. And scientifically, it has been measured that the average energetic frequency, and this is not woo-woo, this is science, of each person's field is 20 feet around. So every time, like right now, my
your aura.
I just heard him walk across the floor. Our frequencies are connecting because my ceiling is not 20 feet above my head.
Technically, I mean, if you go out, I mean, it's like, where are the edges of you? It's way beyond that.
It is way I mean, and that's why I specifically said that's science. They're just measuring what the body is radiating, and that's it. But even with that measurement, you can see that your field is crossing, and this doesn't have to do with bad energy. Your energy is great. I don't want to be in your energy, and you don't need to be in mine either. That's part of the protection. It's not I'm going to be attacked. It's
Like
that
it.
I want to keep my energy clean. And I want to be sitting in my energy, and I don't want my energy coming out there and throwing itself all over you. So let me just
Yeah, I'll leave this interview going, oh, that was miserable.
I mean,
But yeah, I love that. That's
so
beautiful.
there's someone once said, a friend once said during it was a group lunch. It was actually a spiritual meeting, so it's interesting how we all function even when we are in our spiritual best. And that two people started fussing over the check and how to divide it up. Woman had said we could do it this way, and someone else snatched the bill and said, that's not the way, that's stupid, blah, blah, blah. And the person who had the bill snatched from her, instead of reacting like you're so rude or whatever, she just smiled and said, there are many different views to the canyon. Go ahead, do it your way. She didn't say, I'm right, you're wrong. She said, there are many different views. And that's what the answer to all this is. There are many different views to the expression and experience of life in this 3D earthly realm. Which one do you choose? Mm-hmm. And make sure it's a high choice, and then surround yourself, whether it's sacred geometry, high hertz frequency music, people, your time with your team, your divine team. Make sure that it's focused and centered in the truth and light of the experience that you seek to have, not I am a janitor.
Right.
Unless that's what you want more of.
Do, right. Unless you actually want to become that
super janitor.
I'm going to change the world with my cleanliness.
And here's the thing though. We're laughing and it's funny. There's a guy at the Mayo Clinic who is a janitor, but when he's done with his shift, he goes to the pediatric oncology ward and reads books and talks to the kids who are by themselves, whether that's because they actually are alone in the world or their people just can't be there right at that moment, doesn't matter. He is spending time with these kids, giving them comfort and confidence and love that things are going to be okay. And when families do come in and they say, who are you? And, he says, I'm part of the medical staff. If you ask the nurses and the doctors on the floor, they're going to say he's part of the medical staff and he is the janitor, but he is doing his purpose work. And I'm getting full body chills.
I just got something. I just have to say it. When you said that about the Mayo Clinic, the thing that came in was the janitor on Scrubs, that TV series. I don't know if you watched it.
I've seen it, but I don't know.
They kind of allude to maybe he's a guide for one of the doctors there. And and it was just like, and then there was another one with Matthew Perry that, the janitor was like, took him into another dimension where he became 17 again or something like that. So, it's like, oh, the janitors, maybe they're the spiritual guides anyway.
Well, and it's interesting. I don't know that I can make it translate, but it is the sacred geometry frequency is available in repetitive motion. What is a janitor doing when they're vacuuming, sweeping, washing, scrubbing, waxing floors and all that? If you're going like this, dusting, wiping, that's a Fibonacci spiral. Mm-hmm. So
that's kind of the Karate Kid,
wax on, wax off. That's right. Exactly.
Well, I'm trying to keep these calls a little bit shorter. We're doing a live series next, and those will be a little bit longer, and then we'll have guests call in. And I would love
to do that, because that is one of the functions that I miss the most of this type of format is not engaging with.
Yeah, this was what the vision opened first, and now the vision is like now weekly long live calls where we can play with the audience. So that I just follow the energy legit in my business. I mean, it's just...
And everyone who's listening, watching, follow her, because what she just said is how you get from here to there. Follow the flow and trust it, even when it doesn't make sense.
Oh, it never makes sense. And it's almost like chaos in a way, and I'll like wake up and be like, oh, I got to do this. I mean, it's just like new, something to add. Okay, thanks for putting that in there. Okay, appreciate it. Well, you have a small offer for us today about activating our inner superpowers. So you want to tell us a little bit about that? The link will be below, you guys, by the way.
I don't know for sure what's on there. Is this the workshop?
Okay, it's a two-part workshop,
Yes.
Activating your inner superpower to be the light and manifest abundance with ease and grace.
Yes, it is a wonderful experience. And what I have come to learn from my listening is that if people are willing to receive the teaching, the intellectual, the idea aspect of things, it helps to soothe the left brain ego so that then the work from the divine feminine, from the right brain, can come in without that obstruction, because the ego is kind of bemused, like, oh, this is happening, that's happening. So when I say we, it's me and the team, we create scenarios where people can be uplifted into that which is calling to them. So we do the teaching. And then the second part of the workshop is a quantum energy lab where we engage one-on-one in the group format. And I work with people on whatever is on their minds, their hearts. And if they need an energy attunement or a clearing or a timeline clearing, we do that. So that's the reason for the two-part workshop. Is you've got to keep things in balance if you want harmony and flow. So we can't just always deal with the woo-woo side. We have to you need your intellectual brain. We couldn't function as human beings if we didn't have it, but we need it to understand it's the servant. This side, the right brain, is the leader, and the left, the masculine, is the servant. So that format of teaching and then doing the energy work serves the opening of that. And then there's a bunch of PDFs and so forth that come along with it so that you can understand how you can improve your ability to tame the ego and keep it in its right, help it train it to be in its proper place while you are opening to receive even more. And the small example of this is when I first started doing this as a business, I was doing strictly angel readings with cards, and I'd get messages that would be spontaneous downloads, not just the cards, but that was what I did. And in my mind, I said, I'm not going to teach. I have a family full of teachers, and I am not an energy healer. That's just too dang weird. And so I started out for a year or so from that perspective. And I went to a regular networking event with a friend, not any kind of spiritual type of thing. And I happened to be talking to this guy who was probably in his 40s. And I was hiding behind the term life coach, because that was as neutral, as normal, as 3D world as you could get doing what I do. And this dude probably was the only one in the room who he said, what is that? Now, was that him or was that them? I believe it was them, because if you think about, everybody knows what a coach is. And if you put life in front of coach, it's like, I'm not a baseball coach, I'm a life coach. But he didn't get it. Why? Because I needed to be busted out. You're hiding behind something that isn't even considered normal to regular people. So stop it. And I just laughed. And then when I told him what I actually do and what it is, he started laughing. He's like, oh, you're that woo-woo kind of person. My wife is all into that. You should have just said that, because I would have understood that. Thank you. So that's why we have to feed both sides. So we do the woo-woo stuff, but we give the intellectual, like the conversation we had about dark and this and that, could spark someone to go do some research. I mean, that's one of the most benefits of the internet, is you can find out anything without ever moving out of your chair. So that's the whole point of the offering, is helping you get from where you are to where you want to be, opening those doors and those windows and those pathways to assist you in, how is it, what can I do daily to support myself to move out of where I am to where I want to be? That's the work that I'm offering in
That's beautiful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
You guys, just want to let you know that we do have the VIP, and it's like for life. I mean, for however long the Creator Mastermind Haven runs. So you'll always get the downloads for the audios, and you'll be a part of this. And I just want to remind you about that. That link's below, so you can get more information on that. If you're not a VIP, I want to remind you to hop in the Facebook group. And last reminder is 10 of these calls have hidden Easter eggs in them. And if you get all 10 words and you can make a sentence out of them, send it to us. My agency, it's called Hot Hustle, is going to give you 3 hours of free work. So that's a part of it. And there's a bunch of other digital offers, and some of our guests have chimed in and gave some freebies for that so that you won't get regularly. So with that being said, I hope you jump in and become a VIP. And as you can find all those codes in the transcripts if you don't want to listen to everything. There's no limit on that. You don't have to finish it by the end of this event either. So if you find the 10 codes in a year from now, and you can send us a message, and the message isn't like written out there publicly, then you can still win all that. So I just wanted to say that aloud.
So follow your intuition, everybody.
No, so you know which 10 to go to. Beth, this has been absolutely phenomenal. Thank you so much. I just really enjoy you. I hope to have you live soon. Thank you.
I accept.
Bye, everyone. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to run from you.
I was just going to wait another second or so, and then I'm like, I think she's coming back.
Yeah, I was like, I usually like to end the stream and then, hi, I didn't end the stream. I'm ending.